Every year I like to conclude this part of our ceremonies by commending the practice of a virtue to our graduates. This year I want to say a word about one that fits well with what Mrs. Noonan has just spoken to you about. I want to say a word about the virtue of studiousness. I know some of you are thinking you're 4 years too late. And others, maybe the philosophers among you, are thinking that's a virtue? It is. Aquinas says it's an aspect of temperance. And it's not just a virtue for students. It'll serve you well as you begin the next chapter of your lives tomorrow. You've been in school for 16 years, and studying has been your full-time job. Now you'll have new responsibilities, deadlines for work, phone calls to return, meetings to attend. These things are important, but they leave little time for reflection, contemplation, or sustained attention to any object of thought. And it's not only external events, meetings, phone calls, that distract us. Just as often, the interruption comes from within. The poet Mary Oliver says that we have a self within the self that whistles and pounds upon the door panels and tosses itself splashing into the pool of meditation. It reminds you that you must phone the dentist, that you're out of mustard, that your Uncle Stanley's birthday is 2 weeks hence. The internet makes it especially easy to distract ourselves. Think how many times a day you check your phone. Apple says 80 times a day on average. Or social media, Facebook says that the average user spends 50 minutes a day on its site. Or simply get lost browsing the web. You only intended to look up the date of the Gettysburg Address. An hour later, you're reading about mutant superviruses. But I digress. Studiousness is the virtue that moderates our natural desire to know, so we can devote attention to the right things in the right way. This is important because there is, in fact, a right way to know things. We're inundated with information. We cram and consume it, we sell it, we use it to impress people at parties. It's easy to forget that there's a difference between information and knowledge, and that the difference consists in thinking about the information we have. The one-time Soviet spy, Whittaker Chambers, tells a story about watching his daughter sit in her high chair smearing porridge on her face. He came to believe in God, he said, while contemplating the delicate convolutions of her ear. Those intricate, perfect ears, Chambers thought, could only have been created by God's design. Chambers would have missed the moment if he'd been scrolling through his news feed. The world is a gift from God. It takes its form from his wisdom. Studiousness disposes us to know the world with wonder and gratitude. It points us toward God. And this brings me to my second point. Studiousness is a virtue that prepares us for the spiritual life. There are times in life when it seems as if God is silent. Many great saints write about experiencing this sense of abandonment. Saint Therese of Lisieux writes in her spiritual autobiography about the thickest darkness which God permitted to invade her soul. But before we conclude that God is really being silent, we ought to ask ourselves whether we are really listening. When the Lord called to Samuel in a dream, Eli instructed him to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Prayer, the philosopher Simone Weil observed, is the orientation of all the attention of which the soul is capable towards God. This is harder than it sounds. Often we confuse attention with a kind of muscular effort. We furrow our brows, purse our lips, hold our breath. This is not attention. True attention, Weil writes, consists of suspending our thought, leaving it detached, empty, and ready to be penetrated by the object. Studiousness is the virtue of attention. It disposes us to want the truth, to seek it ardently, but also to wait attentively on it. When you practice studiousness in your daily life, when you read a book, as you should tomorrow, or look at a painting, or talk to a friend, it prepares you to give your full attention to God. If if we concentrate our attention on trying to solve a problem of geometry, Weil writes, and if at the end of an hour we're no nearer to doing so than at the beginning, we have nevertheless been making progress, each minute, in another more mysterious dimension. It is certain that this effort will bear its fruit in prayer. Over the last 4 years, you've spent many hours studying. Allow me to offer some parting advice on cultivating the virtue of studiousness. Don't confuse it with willpower. Willpower, Weil says, has practically no place in study because the intelligence can only be led by desire. The joy of learning is as indispensable in study as breathing is in running. As you enter the professional world, set aside a little time to become an amateur. That is, someone who pursues an action or thought or cultivates a talent for the love of it. Second, devote your time and attention to things that deserve them. If the natural world's a good place to start, go outside and leave your cell phone behind. Learn the names of the plants in your yard. Observe birds in flight and learn to distinguish their shapes and calls. Attention, Oliver says, is the beginning of devotion. And finally, set aside a little time every day to pray. Start small, just a few minutes, when you refuse all interruptions and put yourself in the presence of God and say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." God bless you all, and congratulations.